Do you often use Google? Do you ask Google all about Singapore? Good! In this series, I am here to answer the web most commonly asked question about moving to and living in Singapore. This is the Immigration People Autocomplete Answers. Is moving to Singapore worth it? It's totally a yes for me because I used to be a Malaysian and I moved to Singapore about 12 years ago, and today I'm a Singaporean. So in my perspective, it's totally worth it. And back then, the reason why I came here is because I wish to explore more opportunity working overseas, and Singapore really provides a really conducive environment for me to find my career path here. Meanwhile, for some of my clients, they really love Singapore because of multiple factors, such as Singapore is very safe, it's clean, they have a really good education system. So for them, moving to Singapore, it's really worth it. It's moving to Singapore hard? Totally hard. That is the reason why there are so many immigration firms around to help you to navigate this complex journey. If it's very easy, you can actually do it yourself, you don't need to engage a professional. But of course, even with so many immigration firms around, there are still people who try to do it themselves, but they tend to get rejections. So moving to Singapore is indeed not easy, but with a professional help, we can help you to breeze through the whole process. From my experience, I entrusted my team to handle my citizenship application, and I did not even look at the form. So that's how much I trusted my team. And of course, everything was going pretty well. Yeah, it was hassle-free, and I finally got my citizenship approved. How to immigrate to Singapore? Well, there are many ways that you can migrate to Singapore. First, you must get a pass in Singapore. So most of the time, people will opt for a work pass. So you can either look for a job or you can also start your own company in Singapore. Of course, there are also options for you to be married to a Singaporean, and then you can actually get a long-term visit pass and eventually apply for permanent residency in Singapore. So it really depending on what you have in mind, what do you want to do, and what's your ultimate goal in Singapore. Is Singapore good for expats? Confirm good lah. Just look at myself. I used to be an ex-expat, so I converted to citizen. And why? Because of the stable currency in Singapore. And it's times 3 times. So that is what attracted me to come over to Singapore to work. Similar as so many foreigners here in Singapore, the reason why they come here is because they're attracted to many good sides of Singapore. Some of them want to send their kids into a good school in Singapore. So for a lot of expats, Singapore is really a heaven. Yeah, it has a lot of progression for your career, and it is also very safe. It's very convenient to travel, so that is what, Singapore is good for. How much do expats earn in Singapore? Wow, that's a really good question. I have been in the industry for about 6 years, and I have served close to 3,000 expats. My client's salary will be somewhere between 3,000, and I even have clients who earn 100,000 a month. So let's find out, how much does Google says about salary range for expat. From what I see here, the pay range in Singapore for expats varies between 2,140 to 37,700 Sing dollar per month. Now, you have to keep in mind that the salary range in Singapore could vary depending on your skill set, your years of experience, and also your expertise in your job. Is being a foreigner in Singapore taxable? Well, I remember there's a saying, there is only 2 things that are certain in life: death and your taxes. Of course it's taxable. As a foreigner, as long as you're working in Singapore, you have to pay for the taxes here. As per my understanding, if you manage to stay in Singapore for at least 183 days, you'll be considered as a tax resident and you can enjoy a preferred tax rate in Singapore. Of course, if you wish to find out more about tax rate or any tax advisory services, you should totally consult a tax advisor. Is being a foreigner in Singapore a good investment? that's very strange questions. I think it's definitely a good investment to come into Singapore as a foreigner, but you know what's the best investment? Is to turn yourself to a local, which means by converting yourself to a Singapore PR or even a Singapore citizen. Why is that so? It's because you'll be able to enjoy a lot of benefit being a local, such as you'll be able to get a 55% discount on your house. So as a PR, you will only be subjected to 5% of additional buyer's stamp duty. And you can also send your child into a good local school once you converted to a Singapore PR. Is working in Singapore good? Yes, for sure it's good because money is good mah. That was the reason why I came over to Singapore to work 12 years ago. But honestly speaking, working in Singapore can be quite stressful because generally the pace is a bit faster. But there are plenty of opportunities in Singapore, be it working for other company or even running your own business. So looking back, I have been here for 12 years. I used to be a Singapore girl with Singapore Airlines and now running my business in Singapore. I really enjoy it a lot and I definitely recommend you to come to work or even start a business in Singapore. Is working in Singapore better than Malaysia? Well, let's start with the politically correct answer. I think that there are pros and cons for both countries. However, in my personal experience, I have worked in Malaysia for 1.5 years before I moved to Singapore. I find it more difficult to save in KL because back then, the transportation system is not so established compared to Singapore, so I have to have a car in KL and that incurred a lot of expenses. While when I came over to Singapore, I rely pretty heavily on MRT and buses, so generally I managed to save a lot more. And in terms of education, some of the schools in Malaysia are still using Malay as the main language back then. So Singapore is more internationally oriented. So I felt that there are more opportunities in Singapore, and I managed to expand my horizon worldwide as well. In terms of career progression, especially if you are a business owner, I feel like Singapore is a better place because it is very business friendly and government put in a lot of support and subsidy to help locally owned Singapore companies. During COVID, I can recall that every month we are being subsidized for some of our employee expenses, and that really helps the immigration people a lot. So subjectively speaking, for me, I feel like Singapore is actually a better place. Thanks for joining me today, and of course, thank you Google, and thank you for asking these wonderful questions so we are able to answer for you. As usual, like, share and subscribe so you will not miss out on our weekly new content. Let me know if you have any questions below, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Is working in Singapore good?
Very good.
这样做啊。
Chocolate.
Why?
Very good chocolate.